You didn't click on this by accident. I know that sounds like something people say all the time, but take a moment and really sit with it. Out of thousands of videos, thousands of voices, and endless noise online, this specific message crossed your path right now, and something in you paused. Something in you leaned in instead of scrolling past. That pause wasn't random. That was your spirit recognizing alignment. Lately, there's been a strange stirring inside you. Not fear, not excitement exactly. More like awareness, a quiet sense that something is shifting beneath the surface of your life. You may not be able to explain it clearly, but you've felt it. A pull towards something unfamiliar. A sense that someone important exists somewhere ahead of you. Even though you haven't met them yet, you might have seen faces in dreams that don't belong to anyone you know, or felt sudden emotional reactions to places' names, or moments without understanding why. These are not coincidences, they are signals. There are moments when God speaks loudly, and there are moments when He speaks through tension, anticipation, and silence. What you're experiencing right now is the second kind. Heaven is positioning you, and the reason it feels uncomfortable at times is because movement is happening in the unseen. Your spirit is being stretched to prepare you for something new, something weighty, something that requires maturity rather than excitement. For a long time, your journey has felt solitary. Even when surrounded by people, you've often felt misunderstood. Conversations felt shallow. Connections felt temporary. You've had to carry thoughts, convictions, and burdens that others didn't seem to notice or care about. You learned early how to stand on your own spiritually. You learned how to pray alone, how to fight quietly, how to endure seasons where it felt like heaven was silent and help was nowhere in sight. But here's the truth most people miss. God uses isolation as preparation, not punishment. The loneliness you walked through was not abandonment. It was training. It taught you how to hear God's voice without interference. It forced you to build depth instead of dependence. It shaped discernment in you that only grows in silence. And now that foundation matters, because the next phase of your life cannot be entered with spiritual immaturity. There comes a point where isolation has done its job, where strength has been formed, where identity has been settled, and when that point arrives, God begins preparing alignment. Not crowds, not random connections. Alignment. Purposeful, strategic, divinely timed connection that does not replace God, but works with what God has already built inside you. You were never meant to walk every part of this calling alone. Yes, you needed seasons of separation. Yes, you needed to learn how to stand without leaning on people. But there are assignments that cannot be fulfilled by one person indefinitely. There are battles that intensify. There are responsibilities that expand. And when they do, heaven releases reinforcement. Scripture has always reflected this pattern. God rarely moves through isolated vessels forever. He connects people when the assignment requires multiplication instead of endurance. Moses had Aaron, David had Jonathan, Paul had Silas. Even Jesus, fully divine, chose not to walk alone. He sent his disciples out in pairs, because heaven understands something the enemy understands very well. Agreement multiplies authority. Right now, God is preparing you for a meeting that carries weight. Not a casual encounter, not a surface-level relationship, a divine alignment with another chosen one who has also been prepared in private. Someone who understands spiritual responsibility, not just spiritual language. Someone who has been shaped through their own seasons of silence, pressure, and refinement. This is why your spirit feels restless lately. Not anxious, but alert. It's why normal routines feel slightly off. Why old distractions no longer satisfy. Why certain conversations feel empty. Your spirit knows a shift is coming before your mind can explain it. Heaven is tuning you to recognize alignment when it appears. And here's something important you need to understand early. This connection is not about replacing God as your source. God remains your source. Always. The person being prepared for you is not meant to carry you, save you, or complete you. They are meant to walk with you, to strengthen what God has already built, to bring balance, clarity, and reinforcement to an assignment that has grown larger than one set of hands. The enemy hates this stage, not because of who you are individually, but because of what happens when two aligned vessels move together. Isolation limits reach, unity expands it. Agreement disrupts darkness. And that is why the enemy works so hard to keep chosen ones divided, wounded, distrustful, or exhausted. If you've been hurt by people before, that wasn't accidental either. Some of those wounds were meant to teach discernment, not distrust. But the enemy always tries to twist lessons into walls. God heals you so you can recognize truth. The enemy wants you guarded so tightly that you miss what God sends. That's why this season requires clarity. Not rush, not desperation. Awareness. God will not force this alignment. He will reveal it. It will feel natural, not chaotic. Confirmed, not confusing. Grounded, not draining. And it will always draw you closer to God, not away from Him. You may already be seeing signs without realizing it. Repeated numbers, certain scriptures resurfacing, a deeper hunger for prayer. Dreams that linger emotionally even after you wake up. Sudden urges to change routines, explore new spaces, or step into unfamiliar environments. God moves pieces on both sides before the meeting ever happens. Sometimes the preparation intensifies right before alignment. Spiritual resistance increases. Distractions attempt to pull your focus. Old temptations resurface. Unexpected fatigue sets in. This is not regression. This is resistance. The enemy presses hardest when timing is close. But hear this clearly. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not missing anything. Heaven is precise. What God is preparing will arrive when both hearts are ready, not when impatience demands it. This message isn't meant for everyone. Many will hear it and feel nothing. That's okay. But if something inside you feels steady, alert, and quietly confirmed, then your spirit already knows. God is transitioning you from preparation into positioning. You don't need to chase this. You don't need to force connections. You don't need to announce anything. Your responsibility right now is simple. Stay aligned with God, stay discerning, and stay available. The rest is orchestration. You've carried weight alone long enough. You've built strength in silence. And now, heaven is preparing to add support without weakening your independence, connection without compromising your foundation, and partnership without replacing God. This is not the end of your solitary journey yet, but it is the beginning of transition. And what comes next will require the maturity you've earned. Stay ready. Stay grounded. Stay listening, because alignment is closer than it feels. And when it arrives, it won't need explanation. Your spirit will recognize it instantly. As alignment draws closer, the atmosphere around you begins to change. Not in loud or obvious ways, but in subtle, unsettling shifts that you can feel more than explain. Things that once felt stable start to feel fragile. People who once felt close suddenly feel distant. Situations you thought were settled begin to resurface. This is not chaos for no reason. This is pressure revealing what was always there. Before God brings alignment, He allows exposure. Before connection, He allows contrast. And before breakthrough, He allows resistance. You may have noticed that people are acting differently around you lately. Some seem unusually curious, others unusually cold. Some offer support that feels forced. Others withdraw without explanation. You catch looks that linger too long, silences that speak louder than words, reactions that don't match the situation. You may even feel watched at times, not in a dramatic sense, but in a quiet, observant way. As if your growth has become noticeable to people who never paid attention before. This happens when your inner transformation becomes visible externally. Even when you say nothing, something about you communicates change. Your posture shifts, your energy settles, your reactions become calmer. And that unsettles people who were comfortable with the old version of you. Not because you did something wrong, but because growth disrupts familiarity. Spiritual warfare often doesn't show up as temptation first. It shows up as confusion, as emotional static, as unnecessary complications. The enemy's goal at this stage is simply distract you long enough to delay alignment, not destroy you, delay you. You might feel unusually tired despite resting, mentally foggy despite clarity in your spirit, emotionally pulled in multiple directions at once. Old thoughts try to resurface, whispering doubts you thought you outgrew. What if you're wrong? What if nothing changes? What if you're alone again? These thoughts aren't coming because you're weak. They're coming because something is close. Resistance increases when timing narrows. You may also notice an increase in subtle spiritual attacks through people. Not open hostility, but passive behavior. Backhanded comments, sudden competitiveness. People questioning your intentions or minimizing your progress. Some may try to reinsert themselves into your life unexpectedly, not because they care, but because they feel you slipping beyond their influence. This is where discernment matters more than emotion. Not everyone who returns is sent by God. Not every door that reopens is meant to be walked through. Sometimes resistance shows up disguised as familiarity, nostalgia, or comfort. The enemy often uses what once worked to try and pull you backward when forward movement becomes inevitable. Pay attention to patterns. God speaks through repetition. If the same type of distraction keeps appearing, it's not random. If the same emotional trigger keeps surfacing, it's being targeted. Warfare before alignment is rarely dramatic. It's repetitive, subtle, persistent. Another sign you're nearing alignment is heightened sensitivity. You feel things more deeply. Joy feels purer. Sadness feels heavier. Worship feels richer. Silence feels louder. This isn't emotional instability. It's spiritual attunement. Your spirit is becoming more responsive to heaven, which also makes it more aware of resistance. This sensitivity can feel overwhelming if you don't understand it. You might wonder why small things affect you more than they used to, why certain words linger, why certain environments drain you. This is because your tolerance for misalignment is decreasing. What you once ignored now irritates your spirit. What you once tolerated now exhausts you. That's growth, not regression. During this phase, prayer often shifts. You may find yourself praying without many words, sitting in silence more, feeling led to withdraw briefly from noise, social interaction, or constant input. God reduces noise before he releases clarity. Silence creates space for instruction. At the same time, distractions increase. Notifications, obligations, random issues, things that demand immediate attention but carry no lasting value. The enemy wants you busy, not broken. Busy people don't listen deeply. Busy minds miss divine timing. This is why discipline matters here. Not discipline driven by fear, but by focus. Choosing what you give your energy to. Choosing when to rest and when to engage. Choosing obedience over impulse. You might also experience spiritual testing through misunderstanding. People may misinterpret your intentions. Assume things about you that aren't true. Judge your silence as arrogance. Your boundaries as rejection. This hurts, especially if you've spent much of your life trying to be understood. But clarity doesn't come from defending yourself. It comes from consistency. God often allows misunderstanding because it reveals who is aligned with your calling and who is attached to a version of you that no longer exists. Not everyone will understand your obedience. Not everyone will support your growth, and that's okay. Alignment does not require universal approval. Another layer of warfare appears internally. You may feel tempted to rush, to force outcomes, to seek connection prematurely just to escape loneliness. Be careful here. Impatience can mimic discernment when you're tired. Desire can sound like instruction when you're weary. God's timing does not create anxiety. It creates readiness. If you feel pressured, panicked, or rushed, pause. Heaven does not push, it leads. Resistance pushes. God guides. One of the clearest signs alignment is near is the exposure of false attachments. Relationships that once felt meaningful suddenly feel draining. Conversations feel hollow. Support feels conditional. This is painful, but necessary. God removes substitutes before releasing substance. You may grieve these losses, even when you know they're necessary. Let yourself grieve. Grief does not mean disobedience. It means transition. But don't confuse grief with regret. Some chapters end without explanation, because they were only meant to prepare you, not accompany you. Spiritual warfare also intensifies in dreams during this phase. You may dream of being chased, blocked, delayed, or observed, or dreams where you're searching for something but can't quite reach it yet. These dreams reflect spiritual movement, not fear. They're indicators of process. Pay attention, but don't obsess. God reveals what you need, not everything at once. One important truth: alignment does not arrive to save you from warfare. It arrives because you survived it. The strength you're developing now will be required later. The discernment you're learning now will protect what God gives you next. If God aligned you too early, you would lean on the gift instead of Him. If He aligned you without resistance, you wouldn't value it properly. Pressure refines appreciation. You are being sharpened, not stalled. The watching you sense is not always human. There is spiritual attention when assignments grow. Darkness watches light, not to admire it, but to measure it. But light does not fear observation. It continues to shine. And here is something crucial. You are not meant to fight this stage aggressively. You are meant to stay steady. Calm obedience is your greatest weapon right now. Not emotional reactions, not explanations, not overcorrection. Stillness confuses resistance. Continue praying. Continue aligning your habits with your values. Continue choosing integrity when no one is watching. Especially when no one is watching. Because heaven is watching. Alignment does not announce itself early. It approaches quietly, wrapped in preparation, resistance, and refinement. And when it finally arrives, it will make sense why everything before it felt heavy. You are closer than you think. Not because circumstances look perfect, but because resistance doesn't rise unless purpose is approaching. Stay focused. Stay grounded. Stay listening. What God is preparing cannot be stopped, only delayed. And you are not delaying it. You are enduring it. And endurance always precedes connection. When alignment draws near, concealment becomes impossible. Not because you force truth into the open, but because light has a way of dissolving whatever was held together by darkness. This is the phase where things begin to unravel, not violently at first, but quietly, unmistakably. What was once hidden starts slipping. What was once controlled starts cracking. And what was once denied starts demanding acknowledgement. You may notice it first in people's behavior. Small inconsistencies, shifts in tone, energy that no longer matches words. The smiles are still there, but they feel strained. The support is still offered, but it feels thin. People who once spoke confidently around you begin choosing their words more carefully. Some grow defensive without provocation. Others grow unusually silent. It's not because you changed your approach. It's because truth is pressing against whatever they've been avoiding. Masks don't fall all at once. They fracture. Exposure is rarely dramatic. It doesn't need confrontation or accusation. It happens when presence becomes undeniable. Your clarity becomes a mirror, and not everyone is comfortable with their reflection. When you stop seeking validation, those who relied on your uncertainty feel exposed. When you stop explaining yourself, those who benefited from your self-doubt feel threatened. This phase can feel disorienting because you're not doing anything differently, yet everything around you feels unstable. Conversations stall. Relationships feel awkward. People may project motives onto you that aren't yours. Accuse you silently of judgment simply because you're no longer confused. This is a common response when truth surfaces. People often mistake clarity for criticism. You may feel tempted to soften yourself again, to reassure others, to explain that you haven't changed, that you're still safe, still accommodating, still willing to shrink if needed. Resist that urge. This moment is not about proving your innocence. It's about allowing revelation to complete its work. God does not expose to humiliate. He exposes to liberate. For some, this exposure will lead to repentance. For others, it will lead to retreat. Both outcomes serve a purpose. Those aligned with truth will lean in. Those attached to illusion will step back. You don't need to decide who belongs where. Exposure sorts that naturally. This is also the stage where you may see people contradict themselves. Say one thing publicly and another privately. Offer encouragement while harboring resentment. Appear supportive while subtly undermining. These contradictions were always there. You're just seeing them clearly now because you're no longer filtering reality through hope alone. Clarity removes denial. As masks crack, emotions rise. Guilt surfaces. Insecurity flares. Some people may try to rewrite history, downplay moments, shift blame, minimize your experience. This is not your cue to argue. Truth doesn't require defense. It stands on its own. You may feel grief during this phase, not because you're losing people, but because you're losing illusions. You're seeing people as they are, not as you hoped they'd become. That loss is real. Honor it, but don't cling to it. The collapse of false masks also happens internally. You may confront parts of yourself you once avoided, motivations that were mixed, attachments that were rooted in fear, patterns that were learned, not chosen. This is not condemnation, it's refinement. God exposes internally so alignment externally doesn't rest on unstable ground. You are not being stripped. You are being clarified. There's a strange loneliness that can accompany this phase. Not because you're alone, but because fewer people can meet you at this level of honesty. Small talk feels exhausting. Pretense feels unbearable. You crave depth, but not everyone is willing to go there. This doesn't mean you're superior. It means you're aligned with truth, and truth demands presence. Some will accuse you of changing. Let them. Growth often looks like betrayal to those who benefited from your silence. Some will say you've become distant. In reality, you've become discerning. Some will say you've become cold. In reality, you've stopped overgiving. Exposure reveals who was connected to you and who was connected to access. This phase teaches you restraint. Not every realization needs to be spoken. Not every truth needs to be shared. Wisdom knows when silence is protection, not avoidance. You don't need to announce what you see. God will handle what needs handling. You may also notice that lies struggle to exist around you now. People stumble over their words. Stories don't add up. Explanations feel rehearsed. Again, you don't need to respond. Light disrupts deception simply by being present. This is why humility matters here. Exposure is not a weapon, it's a byproduct. If you use it to elevate yourself, you lose its protection. Stay grounded, stay grateful, stay teachable. There's also a spiritual dimension to this collapse. Darkness relies on agreement, on silence, on confusion. When truth surfaces, those agreements break. This can create turbulence, emotional reactions, sudden distance, even subtle hostility. Don't internalize it. This resistance is not about you personally. It's about the loss of control. Remember this, not everyone is meant to survive exposure with you. Some were only meant to walk with you while the masks still fit. You may feel moments of doubt during this stage, wondering if you're being too harsh, too withdrawn, too aware. That doubt is natural. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're transitioning. Ask God for confirmation, not comfort. He will steady you. As truth surfaces, your peace may actually increase, even while your circle shrinks. That's alignment beginning to take shape. Peace is often the first confirmation before provision, connection, or clarity arrives. You might also notice that people begin revealing themselves without being asked. Confessions slip out. Admissions surface. Behaviors change abruptly. This isn't coincidence. Your presence creates an environment where pretense is difficult to maintain. Let it happen. Do not rush to repair what truth is dismantling. Some things must fall so something real can stand. This phase is uncomfortable because it removes control. You can't manage outcomes. You can't predict reactions. You can only remain anchored, and that's enough. You are not responsible for how others respond to truth. You are responsible for how you steward it. Exposure is not the end of connection. It's the end of false connection. What comes next will be built on honesty, not convenience. On alignment, not access. On purpose, not proximity. The masks falling now are clearing space. Space for real partnership, real support, real unity. The kind that doesn't require shrinking, pretending, or explaining. You're not losing ground. You're losing weight. And once the unnecessary falls away, movement becomes easier. Truth doesn't destroy what's real. It reveals it. Let the masks fall. What remains will be worth carrying forward. Before elevation ever becomes visible, there is always a narrowing. A quiet, deliberate separation that doesn't feel like promotion at all. It feels like pruning. This is the stage where confession becomes unavoidable. Accountability becomes necessary, and separation becomes sacred. Not because God is withdrawing from you, but because He is drawing you closer to what can sustain the weight of what's coming. Confession in this season isn't about public exposure or dramatic apologies. It's far more intimate than that. It's the moment when you stop negotiating with your own conscience. When you admit not to impress anyone, not to appear humble, but because truth is the only thing that can carry you forward without cracking under pressure. You begin to notice it internally first. Thoughts you used to justify now feel heavy. Habits you tolerated start disrupting your peace. Motives you once excused no longer sit quietly. This isn't condemnation, it's calibration. God is aligning your inner world with the level you're about to walk into. Elevation without integrity always collapses. Heaven refuses shortcuts. This is the phase where God asks you questions He already knows the answer to. Not to trap you, but to see if you're ready to agree with Him. Agreement is power. Silence is delay. You may find yourself confessing things you never spoke out loud before. Not because they were shocking, but because they were subtle. Pride disguised as independence, fear masked as wisdom, control hidden behind responsibility. These aren't sins that scream, they whisper. And whispers are dangerous at higher altitudes. Accountability enters quietly here. God will bring one or two voices into your life, not a crowd, who can hear truth without being threatened by it. People who don't need you to stay the same to feel secure. People who can challenge you without competing with you. This is rare, and it's intentional. True accountability doesn't flatter you. It steadies you. You might resist it at first, not because it's wrong, but because it exposes areas you were managing privately. Accountability interrupts isolation without dissolving discernment. It doesn't demand access to everything, but it refuses to let you lie to yourself. And then comes separation. This is where many misunderstand God. They assume separation means punishment or abandonment. But divine separation is not rejection, it's precision. God separates not to reduce you, but to refine the environment around you. Some relationships will quietly fade. No conflict, no explanation, just distance. Others will end abruptly with tension you didn't initiate. Some doors will close even though they still look good on the outside. This isn't loss, it's alignment. You are being separated from what cannot go where you're going. This includes people, patterns, and even versions of yourself that were necessary once, but are now restrictive. God does not elevate baggage. He elevates obedience. Separation often feels unfair because not everything being removed is harmful. Some things are simply misaligned. Not wrong, just not assigned. And God is not obligated to preserve what will compromise the future He's preparing. You may feel misunderstood during this phase. People may question your decisions, interpret your obedience as arrogance, your boundaries as rejection, your silence as pride. Let them. Obedience doesn't require consensus. There is a loneliness in divine separation, but it's not empty. It's spacious. It creates room for clarity, for instruction, for intimacy. Noise reduces. Distractions fall away. And suddenly, you can hear again. This is where elevation is actually negotiated, not publicly, but privately, in moments where no one is watching, where obedience costs comfort, where integrity costs approval. God watches how you move when separation strips away applause. Confession deepens here, not because you're failing, but because you're maturing. You start confessing not just actions, but attitudes. Not just mistakes, but tendencies. This level of honesty is not required for salvation, but it is required for stewardship. What you're being trusted with next requires cleanliness of heart, not perfection of performance. Accountability becomes a covering, not a constraint. You stop seeing it as limitation and start recognizing it as protection. It keeps you grounded when momentum increases. It keeps your feet steady when influence grows. It keeps your voice clear when pressure mounts. Elevation amplifies everything: gifts, influence, weaknesses, blind spots. God handles blind spots before He handles platforms. This is also where you'll notice an internal strengthening. You're less reactive, less eager to defend, less concerned with being understood. Peace becomes more consistent, discernment sharper, discouragement shorter-lived. That's not coincidence. That's readiness. Divine separation also removes counterfeit responsibilities, things you were carrying that were never yours. Emotional labor, unspoken expectations, guilt-driven obligations. God releases you from burdens He never assigned, so you have capacity for what He did. This can feel uncomfortable at first. You might feel like you're doing less, saying less, engaging less. But what you're actually doing is conserving energy for precision. Elevation requires focus. And then something subtle but powerful happens. Temptation changes. It becomes quieter, more strategic, less obvious, because the enemy knows blatant attacks won't work here. This is why accountability matters even more. Isolation at this stage isn't strength, it's vulnerability. God doesn't elevate lone wolves. He elevates anchored ones. As separation completes its work, you'll feel a shift. Not excitement, but steadiness. Not adrenaline, but confidence. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind that comes from alignment, not ambition. You won't feel rushed anymore. Deadlines stop controlling you. Comparison loses its grip. You trust timing because you trust process. That's when elevation becomes inevitable. Not because you demanded it, but because you're prepared for it. Elevation doesn't always look like visibility. Sometimes it looks like authority. Sometimes like clarity. Sometimes like influence in rooms you never imagined entering. But whatever form it takes, it rests easily on you, because you're no longer carrying what would distort it. Confession cleared your foundation. Accountability reinforced it. Separation protected it. Now elevation has somewhere safe to land. And when it does, it won't change who you are. It will reveal who you've become. Everything up to this point has been preparation. Not just for change, not just for movement, but for arrival. Section 5 is where the weight of the journey finally makes sense, where the long silence, the pruning, the exposure, the separation, all of it converges into clarity. This is not the moment of noise or spectacle. It is the moment of recognition. You realize you are standing in a season you once prayed for, even if it doesn't look the way you imagined when you first asked. Elevation doesn't announce itself. It settles. It arrives quietly, with authority that doesn't need validation. You notice it in how you respond instead of react, in how peace replaces urgency, in how confidence replaces striving. You are no longer chasing alignment, you are walking inside it. And the difference is unmistakable. What once intimidated you now feels manageable. What once overwhelmed you now feels ordered. Not because the challenges disappeared, but because you changed. Capacity expanded. Vision sharpened. Discernment matured. You didn't become fearless, you became grounded. And grounded people don't panic when pressure increases. This is where divine alignment becomes visible, not through performance, but through fruit. Doors open without force. Conversations shift in your favor without manipulation. Opportunities present themselves with confirmation rather than confusion. You're no longer trying to prove your worth. You're stewarding it. The people God connects you with now feel different. There is no competition, no need to impress, no confusion about roles. Unity feels natural. Purpose aligns without explanation. Conversations are efficient, not draining. Trust builds without urgency. These connections don't pull you from your center, they reinforce it. You begin to recognize that this alignment was never about escape from isolation. It was about readiness for responsibility. God didn't withhold connection to punish you. He delayed it to protect the mission. What you're stepping into now requires maturity, restraint, and wisdom that could only be formed in solitude. There is a new weight on your words. When you speak, things move. When you decide, momentum follows. Not because you're louder, but because you're aligned. Authority flows through agreement with heaven, not effort. You'll notice that opposition doesn't disappear, but it changes. It becomes less personal, less emotional, less chaotic. You're no longer fighting to survive, you're standing to advance. Warfare at this level isn't about breaking you. It's about slowing you. And it won't work because you're no longer running without direction. You are walking with intention. This is also where gratitude deepens. Not shallow thankfulness, but reverence. You understand now why certain prayers were delayed, why certain doors stayed closed, why certain relationships ended. You see the protection in the disappointment, the mercy in the denial, the wisdom in the waiting. Nothing was wasted. Even the pain that felt unnecessary shaped discernment you now rely on daily. Even the betrayal that nearly hardened you taught boundaries that now preserve peace. Even the loneliness that tested your faith anchored your dependence on God alone. You don't resent those seasons anymore. You respect them. Because they built you for this. This is the stage where you stop asking, "What's next?" and start asking, "What's required?" Vision without discipline is dangerous. God trusts you now because you've proven you won't move without instruction. You won't build without foundation. You won't speak without clarity. You are no longer driven by urgency. You are led by alignment. Elevation also brings visibility, but not exposure. People notice you without fully understanding why. Favor follows you into rooms you didn't request access to. Respect meets you before explanation. Influence grows without self-promotion. This is the kind of elevation that doesn't corrupt, because it wasn't pursued for ego. And here's the part few talk about: elevation doesn't remove humility, it redefines it. You no longer confuse humility with hiding. You don't shrink to make others comfortable. You don't dim your clarity to preserve false peace. Humility now looks like obedience, like restraint, like listening more than speaking, like choosing impact over applause. You become selective with your energy, not guarded, intentional. You don't engage every battle. You don't explain every decision. You don't carry every burden. You've learned that saying no to distraction is saying yes to destiny. This is where legacy begins to matter more than recognition. You think generationally now. Decisions aren't just about what benefits you, but what outlives you. You understand that what you build must be sustainable, not impressive. God didn't elevate you to be admired. He elevated you to be effective. And effectiveness often looks quiet. As this season settles, you'll feel a deep internal knowing. Not excitement, not anxiety. Assurance, the kind that doesn't fluctuate with circumstances. You trust yourself because you trust the process that formed you. You trust God because you've seen His faithfulness in the unseen. You no longer fear losing what you've gained, because you know it was never yours to hold alone. You're not at the end of the journey. You're at the beginning of stewardship. And that brings us to the closing truth. You were never forgotten. You were being prepared. You were never delayed. You were being aligned. You were never isolated without purpose. You were being refined for responsibility. What you're stepping into now is not accidental. It is the result of obedience when no one was watching, restraint when you could have rushed, and faith when clarity was withheld. So walk forward without hesitation. Carry what you've been entrusted with carefully. Stay anchored in truth. Stay accountable. Stay aligned. And remember this above all else. Elevation didn't make you chosen. Preparation revealed that you always were. This is your season, not because you demanded it, but because you were ready for it. Walk in it with wisdom, lead with integrity, and never forget the light that carried you here. The journey continues, but now you walk it from alignment, not survival.